Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us. Welcome to this edition of Megaport Live Tech Drop-In. My name is Mike. I'm a solutions architect. Been with Megaport for a couple of years and couldn't be more thrilled to work for such a dynamic company. We are going to spend some time going through a few slides and also some diagrams, sort of whiteboarding, and then we're going to finish in the portal. If along the way you have any questions, please throw them in chat and we'll get going. Okay. So, oh, got my stylus here. Okay. Megaport, complex network simplified. So who are we? Megaport is based in Australia. We have a over 12-year history of delivering value to our customers, and we drive efficiencies and reduce egress costs. And we're the easy button. That's why we're complex, simple, and you can spin up connections in as little as 60 seconds. And we have sales teams that are organized in pods, is what we call them. And you have a sales executive, a solutions architect such as myself, and also a customer success manager. Now, what's interesting is 77% of Megaport connections terminate to the cloud, but almost as interesting is half of those, 43%, go to more than one cloud. And we'll talk a bit about that, but that's one of our specialties, among other things. We really have a few different value props. One, pricing, you pay for what you need, no setup fees. Speed, like I said, very quick in provisioning. Capacity is elastic and right-sized. We don't have a burstable service, but we are elastic in that you can adjust pipes between Megaport endpoints and also to the cloud, depending on what they allow. And we actually recently updated our terms to include month-to-month all the way up to 60-month terms. And we have a huge ecosystem. We're in over 1,100 data centers now, and we're very, very easy to use. Now, Megaport has a few different products. On the left-hand side, our access products, and then our connectivity products on the right. Okay, on the left side, a port is a device in a data center that you connect to either through a last mile circuit or a cross connect and through the meet me room, and then you terminate on a physical device. And that's sort of your beachhead, as I like to call it, to get to all things Megaport. And a lot of customers leverage that. And they also combine that with the next one, the Megaport Cloud Router. And I'll spend some time showing this in a slide here in a little bit, but that's a compute-based product. We jokingly refer to it as my first router. It's got a lot of amazing capabilities, but it's also great for people who are sort of introductory to the networking world. And then we also have Megaport Virtual Edge, which is also a compute-based product. And I'll show you the map and that it'll make sense what I mean when I say that. But Megaport Virtual Edge supports routing, firewall, and SD-WAN vendors. You bring your own license and you take one of those and provision them on our compute stack. On the right side, we have virtual cross connects or VXCs. Those are the layer 2 connections that you can use to connect to the cloud, to other Megaport resources, to the Megaport marketplace, which I'll talk about. We also have Megaport Internet, and thrilled to announce that 100 gig is available in a bunch of markets like Atlanta, Ashburn, Dallas, etc. And so look forward to talking with your account team about that. We've got some incredible promo pricing that we're rolling out. Mega IX is our IX exchange product, which we have worldwide destinations. Marketplace we'll get into when I get into the portal, but that includes published customers like Wasabi or Cloudflare or RingCentral or 8x8. And we allow customers to connect to the Megaport platform through a service key. And Megaport customers who are enabled in the marketplace, that's how they allow people to connect to them. And it's an encryption key, and we can talk a bit about that too. Megaport operates a global private backbone. We procure fiber, both lit and dark fiber, that's meshed throughout the world. You can see we're in Asia Pac, we're in Europe, we're in North America. And all those little flags, that icon that you're seeing is our logo, it's a rocket ship. And in between all of those destinations is a meshed network that our backbone provides multi-fault tolerance, high speed, low latency. And we can tell you exactly how much the latency is round trip between any Megaport endpoint and to the cloud, et cetera. It's exciting. So when we talk about hybrid cloud, this is when we talk about a port. This is that perhaps an external network like what you're seeing on the screen. You have a customer cage, then there's a cross connect through a meet me room, and that connects to that physical port. And typically that's 10, 100, or even 400 gig. We still have some 1 gigs in production, but it is the same price as the 10 gig. and you can see that you can provision that Megaport VXC to the cloud. I'm going to keep reinforcing some of these concepts. If you know them, that's great, but just I want you to see it, in totality. This is another view of that same diagram that I had up where I've got customer CPE, and then I get a circuit through a carrier meet me room, hand off to a last mile circuit that is in the carrier meet me room of a particular Megaport enabled data center. And then there's a cross connect to the port to the Megaport rack. And then you're seeing the VXCs built to the clouds like GCP, AWS, Azure, Oracle, et cetera. Just another way to look at it. We are not a last mile provider. We do recommend providers to get to us. And a lot of our customers just leverage, just a connection from their cage in one of our data centers, which there are over 1,100 of those on our platform now, almost 1,100. So cross cloud, this is the compute that I was talking about. When you see this is our overall footprint and the globe, but if I reduce this map down and into the United States, you'll see that we have compute locations in North America and Canada that are in the Northwest, the Southwest, Midwest, etc. And that is where we have compute for the Megaport Cloud Router. And the Megaport Cloud Router, by the way, is 1 gig up to 100 gig of total throughput. And its use case is to really move workloads between clouds without having to hairpin back to a data center. So if I had workloads in the central region, I could deploy a Megaport Cloud Router, for example, in Chicago, and we've got 6 different independent data centers with redundant zones where we can deploy Megaport Cloud Router, and then I can move between my central Azure and AWS workloads without having to go back to my data center. For example, maybe it's in Denver, or I could deploy it centrally. And it's nice because if I have disparate workloads, and if I have east, west, central, et cetera, I can put a cloud router close to those, and then I can ride the Megaport backbone in between those locations using that meshing that I was just talking about. Okay, this is an example of Denver. You can see I've got Megaport, MCR, and MVE highlighted on the map. And within each one of these data centers is redundant, what we call red and blue zones. Now, this is important, and we recommend this wherever we can place it because occasionally we will perform a maintenance on the network, like all carriers have to. And if you're on a zone that is impacted by a maintenance, and they don't occur very often, every couple of years, we're going to take that device out of service, and anything attached to it will be down for the duration of the maintenance, probably only an hour or two. But what we like to do is provision services in red and blue zones, whether it's a port, an MCR, or an MVE to alleviate that hassle. Okay, so it's a very streamlined approach we take with a lot of our customers. Now, cross-cloud is exactly what I was just describing, going through the clouds using BGP to the Megaport Cloud Router. Virtual POP, that's where we take a license of Palo, of Cisco, of Fortinet, etc., and you bring your own. You attach it to our compute as an instance, and the instances are sized in from 2 core all the way up to 16 core, along with the requisite amount of RAM. And then we also need an internet circuit so you can peer with that. And I'll show you this on a diagram, and it'll be a little more clear. Okay. So these are for example, the vendors that we work with. So MVE is compute plus networking plus the internet. This is an example of an MVE deployment that includes ports. So ports in Michigan, ports in Denver, ports in Dallas. And so for my Texas and Oklahoma region, I can have remote workers. Let's say it's running Palo and their security stack. So they're connecting via Palo to MVEs that are in the Dallas area. So I can deploy in 2 different data centers that license of Palo, and then I can use my remote sites to get to those as a hub. And I could hand it off to my port and my Dallas data center. I could send it up to Nebraska. I could send it up to Michigan. I also could do the same thing with my West Coast resources, in Oregon, Nevada, California, and they can connect to MVE. And then again, we can mesh this all together with a high-speed backbone that's incredibly resilient. So this is something that you may or may not be aware of that we're doing, but this is a perfect example of combining MVE and ports together and doing it in a way where I can maintain low latency and connectivity within a region and segment it so that I'm getting the best performance and leverage that connectivity that we have to the cloud with pre-built NNIs. All right. Now, Global WAN as a service really expands on that one of those first maps I showed you, where you can use our global backbone to interconnect your MCRs, your MVEs, and your ports together. And we've got those built. And what we're seeing a lot of is customers moving away from disparate MPLS networks to technologies like SD-WAN, or in this case, using Megaport global WAN as a service, connecting ports together. So what you're seeing on the screen here is actually a customer that has presence in Denver, DC, and Toronto and London. And they were working with providers, and they had different ones for MPLS. So they wanted a way to streamline their connectivity. They already had ports existing in Denver. So what they decided to do was add ports in the DC area, red and blue, the red and blue zones I was just talking about, also in Toronto and also in London, and then mesh those together using a global VXC, what we call data center interconnect. And so we can uh, build a fully meshed network to all these sites, including regional clouds. And they did something very creative to satisfy their spend with their MPLS provider. They said, hey, we know we have contractual obligations with you, but what we'd like to do is build into these data centers. And so these were Equinix facilities, as it turned out. And so they were able to take that spend, get the last mile connections to the data centers in Toronto, London, and DC, and then again, fully build and mesh this. And this is not a complicated deployment. This is something that could be done in including the cloud, all of these sites together in just a couple hours, if that. So just a unique way of thinking of it that you may not be aware of, that some customers are taking advantage. Okay. With that, I'm going to get out of slide mode, and I want to get into some diagrams in the portal a little bit and talk about some of these use cases in a little bit different view, so that you can see them and reinforce some of the points that I've already made. A lot of our customers start with a single port in a data center. I've mentioned that we have red and blue zones, but in some cases, customers have IPVPN as an example to the cloud. So they may choose to only take down a single port in a Megaport enabled data center. In this particular example, I'm just showing a cage cross connect. And the customer actually decided that they wanted to provision over different on-ramps to get to their Azure workloads, which is perfectly fine. So it gives them some flexibility to have different express routes and split them up. A lot of customers take the approach of provisioning red and blue zones within a data center. This is showing, again, a last mile service provided by a Crown Castle, a Lumen, a Zayo as an example. And a customer's router ultimately is, the CPE that's being used to build the BGP connection to the clouds. And in this case, what we're showing is that the customer has diverse Azure Express routes and also diverse hosted connects out of diverse ports in a single data center. So this is a highly resilient solution. This is a very, very common solution for customers to deploy. Red and blue zone, either last mile or directly from a cross connect. The data center interconnect is another way of showing the example I showed from global WAN, but there's a reason I'm showing it to you in this particular view. What I've got is red and blue ports in 2 Megaport enabled data centers, and they're 10 gigs, which means the VXCs that go between this virtual cross connector layer 2 service can be up to 10 gig, but it is adjustable or elastic up or down. So in this case, I've got a primary and or a backup, and maybe I keep this one at 10 gig and my backup's 1, or based on seasonality, maybe I set it on a 1-year term at 1 gig, and then I need to bump it up. Well, we're only going to bill you over 1 gig for the time that you have it turned up. So you can adjust it as needed. The caveat I like to point out is that the between Megaport endpoints, the services are elastic and adjustable up and down. The cloud providers have some rules about whether you can adjust them or not. Microsoft Azure, you can adjust up depending on the NNI that you're deployed on, but not decrease it. GCP and AWS have some rules that are independent of what Megaport does, but we'll help you familiarize yourself with that if you're not already. We also offer Megaport Cloud Routers attached to ports, kind of like what I was showing you a bit ago. And something exciting that I would point out is we recently rolled out IPsec for MCR. So if you have an encryption use case, want to leverage that through the Megaport Cloud Router, you can actually build tunnels from a remote endpoint. We can have up to 30 per device. That's something I'll show you in the portal, and we just updated that. so that you can remote into this MCR and use it similarly to an MVE, but without the license. All right. So let's look at, and in this example, by the way, I would be able to get from AWS to Azure through the MCR without having to go all the way back to my data center router. I was pointing that out earlier. This is another way to see it. This is another view of Megaport Virtual Edge. And in this example, I've got my branch locations. They're using IPsec to get to the internet. And then you bring your license of Palo that I pointed out earlier as an example, and I deploy it, in this case, in Chicago and DC for regionality. I split it in red and blue zones. I also deploy an internet drain through Megaport to allow me to peer with whomever I'm using at my branch sites. We work with GTT, Lumen, and Cogent as our providers. So you can peer with them to get to us. Then you build your layer 2 hosted connector express route over this VXC to, in this case, Ohio and Iowa and East 2 in central US. Wanted to give you another way to view that. Also, customers will expound on what I showed you regionally. They'll use our backbone and deploy different MVEs in different regions, including Asia Pac and Europe, and tie it back to North America over a global WAN. Right? Let me show you one other piece here that's a cool use case. So this is a medical use case. Let me zoom this down a little, and then I'll blow it back up. So this is a healthcare provider in the Midwest. They had a need to connect all of their remote clinics to several different resources, AWS, Azure, Cloud, as well as Five9's contact center, and to Epic, all right, which is a medical services company. So Epic is also on Megaport. So they were able to connect to the Epic over Megaport ports, but Epic actually required encryption in order to satisfy that requirement using PKI and IPsec. So what the customer did was they brought a license of Cisco MVE, which we put in what we call autonomous mode. Sometimes you'll hear it called C8KV. And we did that with encryption in a Megaport-enabled data center. So that was this level of MVE, but to provide access to all of these remote clinics using VMware, Velo, SD-WAN, that's how they got access. So it was a two-tiered approach, which you can do. So this was the access MVE tied to this encryption that allowed the connection to get to Epic, but then also layer 2 connections to get to these clouds. And then we actually deployed ports and data centers where Five9 has capability. And then that gave them their contact center. So just want you to have some sense for some solutions that you may not know that we did, or ways that we can come about it that you may not have thought about before. So want to pause and see if there's any questions in chat before we keep moving.
No questions.
Okay. So while I'm thinking about it, I want to show the Megaport Marketplace that I was alluding to just a bit ago that's relevant to what we were talking about just a bit ago. So if I click, and this is a portal view of what it looks like, and this is a demo tenant that we use. If I click on Marketplace, you'll see that we've got a whole slew of vendors in here, like I pointed out earlier, like 8x8, like RingCentral. But if I type in here a name like Wasabi, if I go here, there it is, you'll see that Wasabi has ports, and these are the destinations where Wasabi has ports on Megaport, which includes Hillsborough in Portland, Milan, Toronto, Amsterdam, Dallas, Frankfurt, London, etc. And so the way that it works with Wasabi in particular is you actually engage them. There's a form that you fill out. There's some IP addressing that they take care of. And then they actually give you a service key. And so that you would come into the portal, and Todd's got my peer Todd has a port already built. And so what you would do is actually come into the portal, and you would click on plus connection, and then you would actually go in and enter the service key that Wasabi gives you, and it would give you a destination port like Portland or Ashburn or whatever the case may be, where they want you to land, and that'll be the only place that you can connect to. So it's pretty neat. You just go into the portal, it has a timestamp, and that connection is unique to you, and you have that secure connection for your storage. Cloudflare, other providers, including Epic, et cetera. So sometimes when you go into the marketplace, you won't see somebody that you may be looking for. And not all of our customers want to publish that. Some of them want to keep that private. And so in your conversations with them, they may say, yeah, we're not on publish, but here's where we want you to connect. Here, let's facilitate a service key for that. So we've got financial services. We have AI exchange, so you can connect to DigitalOcean or companies like that. And then we also have the voice and video exchange, which includes WebEx and 8x8 and RingCentral and others, so that if you wanted to use Megaport of VXC for SIP voice instead of going over the top, you could leverage us for example, for that. Okay. So with that in mind, I want to just build a couple of items. I have one that's pre-built for a Palo Alto MVE, but I just want to walk you through a port, an MCR, and then we can get to the cloud and provision to an express route out of Denver, for example, to Microsoft, and then we'll wrap things up. Okay. So creating a port is no more difficult than coming into the portal. You've got these three radio buttons with our access products. You've got create port, and I can click on this and I'm going to show Denver since that's where I live. And let's just say we're going to sort by Iron Mountain. Okay. So I'm going to grab Iron Mountain, Denver. And you can see I've got up to 400 gig as an option, but I'm just going to walk you through what the pricing looks like if you've not seen it. Okay. So 10 and 1 gig are 500 on a 12-month term, or 425 all the way up to 60 month. Okay. And then 100 gig would be 4 times a 10 gig. So instead of 500 on a 1 year, it would be 2,000. And by the way, the break-even point when we talk to customers about whether they need multiple 10 gigs, because you can lag ports together, is about 4. So if you think you're going to be over 40 in terms of your throughput, go ahead and buy the 100 gig port, or you can start with a 10 gig and you can lag them together. But that also introduces a cross connect for each one of those ports. So sometimes customers just decide, hey, you know what? I'll start with 100 because I think I'm going to be in advance of that with my bandwidth. And so I'll start with 100 gig. I'll pay 1 cross connect, and then I can grow that to the full port speed. Just something to think about. And then, of course, we've got the 400 gig as well. So just the pricing is incredibly competitive. I'm going to go back and just provision a 10 gig. And I'm going to show port diversity just so you can see what it looks like. And we'll go blue. And it'll do red and blue first. And then we'll do blue. Okay. Give it a quick name, which you can always change. And they'll be configured to different diversity zones. We could create a lag group if we wanted to, but we're not going to. We're going to add 2 at $500 a month for $1,000. And there you go. That's how quick it is to add it. The long pole in the tent is actually getting the LOA from getting the cross connect, not the LOA, pardon me, getting the cross connect from that data center provider. I didn't really talk about this much, but Megaport works with over 100 different data center operators globally, and we are not beholden to any one. It's Iron Mountain, it's Equinix, it's CoreSite, it's Digital Realty, it's 123net, it's a whole slew, and we can work with any of them. But what you'll need to do to get that port provision is actually come into the portal a couple of minutes after you order it, and then click on download LOA, and then this will have the Meet Me Room assignments that you'll go ahead and give to that DCO. And then once that's in, you're up and running. You're good to go. So then you can start provisioning services immediately. You can have up to 100 services on a port. We're never going to give you more than the port speed itself. So if you have a 10 gig port, you could oversubscribe it with your VXCs, but the maximum will be the total throughput. So in this case, never more than 10 gig. And Emma actually tested setting up a connection to DigitalOcean with a VXC in our marketplace, and that's 5 gig, and then also has the 5 gig going to H5 for a DCI or data center interconnect. So very, very simple to do. MCR goes back to those compute locations. And so if I look at where I could create MCR, I'm going to come in here and just so I can show you something maybe a little different, I would show you Ashburn, and let's do DC4. Okay. So that's Equinix. And I wanted you to see that we've got 1 gig MCRs. And I told you about the ability to add IPsec. I can add up to 30 tunnels if I want to. Okay. And it's $100 per 10. Okay. But let's look at that. So if I have a 1 gig MCR, that's $500 a month. If I bump that up to 10, you can see that's 1,000. And just so you can see the larger size, I'm going to bump it all the way up to 100. And that's $2,500 a month on a 12-month term. That is the total throughput in and out, by the way, of 100 gig. So 50 in, 50 out is how you want to think about it. So that's how you want to size it. This is a default ASN for all MCRs. Think of this as your AN AS number for whatever you're connecting to. All right. I'm going to bump this down to 5 gig just for demonstration. And we'll just go ahead and click next. And we'll go ahead and add our MCR. All right. Now, I'm not going to go through quite all the steps of provisioning and Megaport Virtual Edge, but I want you to know that what you do is you go and you create MVE, and then you choose the vendor that you want to work with. And in this case, I chose Palo VM series, and you go ahead and click on next. And what I wanted you to see was what the sizing would look like, and so you could get an idea of pricing. And so if I look at, for example, in Ashburn, let's look at DC4 again. If I did a 2-core with 8 gig of RAM, okay, that is about 840. If I click to a more medium-sized version, you can see it bumps it up to 1660 on a 12-month. And if I went up to 1664, you can see it bumps it up to about 2750. So if I add that, then what I would need to do is put in my SSH key and then add my internet for management and add my internet for data plane. And I'll show you on the one I just built. And then I can build my VXCs accordingly. All right. So those are the components. It's the compute, the amount of cores and RAM, the internet, plus your VXCs. That's how you want to think of that. If I come back to this one I've already got built, I've got this test MVE, just a 2-core, 8 gig in Denver. I've got data to the internet, okay? And I've got 20 meg for management because I want to set that up initially. So just so you know where it is, if I look at these details here, I can actually get to this box in PAN by putting this address in my browser, and this will take me to my PAN instance where I can manage this device in PAN, and then you're going to have another pane of glass, which is managing the Megaport side plus its connectivity. All right. Now, I know we're getting close to time and we're kind of skipping through things, and we're always happy to go back with you with your account team. So reach out for sure. But if I want to connect to for example, to the cloud, and I'm going to grab this express route service key really quick. So I want to get to the West US compute region. I'm going to on-ramp out of Denver, what they call a peering location, using a gig of bandwidth. Okay, so I'm going to grab this key, and I'm going to come into the portal, and I'm going to scroll down and grab Azure, and I'm going to drop that service key in. And when it populates, it's going to give me the option provision one side of my Azure Express route, because Azure wants you to provision one to red, one to blue to give you their SLA diversity. So I'm going to provision one to red. And it's the gig because I specified that in the Azure portal already. That's why it set a gig back to that service key when it went in there. I'm going to assign that quickly to the data plane. And let's go ahead and give this a VLAN assignment of 200 on the A end and 100 on provider side. Click next. Okay. And then I'm going to drop another connection in because I'm going to do the other side of that connection, all right, to the other Azure Blue router. And we'll just come in here and we'll do plus connection, and we'll click on cloud, and we'll scroll down and click Azure, drop in the service key. And now we're going to grab the blue one as soon as it's done thinking about it, because we've already provisioned red. And we'll just call it blue. And we'll put that on the data plane. And we'll put that on VLAN 201 on the A side and 100 on the Azure side. So it'll map to the same side as it goes through Azure's NNI. Okay. That's what I meant to say. Okay. And away we go. So as soon as I click order, that's going to build my express route, red and blue, off of my MVE that I deployed in Denver. I assigned my data plane as a gig, and then I assigned my management plane as 20 meg. And that's it. So you can see all of this is in the shopping cart. So if you want to build it, think about it, come back to it. You can always save it and deploy when you want. So with all that said, I'm going to stop sharing and bid you all a great weekend. And thanks for joining.